September 1995. A mother walked into her daughter's elementary school classroom for parent-teacher night. She glanced at the wall where the class photo hung, the one taken just 3 weeks earlier. 22 smiling faces stared back at her. She counted them. Once, twice. Her hands began to shake. 22 children in the photograph, but there were only 21 students enrolled in Mrs. Patterson's 3rd grade class at Riverside Elementary in Portland, Oregon. For 13 years, that photograph hung on that wall. Teachers walked past it every single day. Parents admired it during school visits. The principal showed it to prospective families touring the building. Nobody noticed. Nobody questioned it. Nobody saw what was hiding in plain sight. One child in that photograph didn't belong there. And one child who should have been there was missing. The answer to one of the Pacific Northwest's most heartbreaking disappearances was staring everyone in the face for over a decade. But it would take a retired teacher's fading memory, a daughter's desperate search, and one impossibility to finally crack open the truth. This is a story of how a single school photograph concealed a secret that would tear apart 2 families, expose a network of deception, and prove that sometimes the most critical evidence isn't hidden at all. It's right there in front of you, waiting for someone to finally see it. Before we get into this, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Sarah Mitchell was 8 years old when she vanished from the Hawthorne District playground on a Thursday afternoon. It was a kind of late summer day where the heat made everything feel slow and safe. Kids played on monkey bars. Parents chatted on benches. Ice cream trucks made their rounds. Sarah's mother, Jennifer Mitchell, had brought her daughter and her younger son to the playground after picking them up from the community daycare. It was their routine. Every Thursday, same park, same time. Jennifer would sit on the bench with other mothers while the children burned off energy before dinner. At exactly 4:37 p.m., Jennifer looked up from her conversation and couldn't find Sarah. She wasn't on the swings. She wasn't at the water fountain. She wasn't with a group of children playing tag near the basketball court. Jennifer called her name, once, then louder. Other parents joined in, spreading across the playground, checking behind equipment, looking in bathrooms, scanning the parking lot. Sarah Mitchell had disappeared in the span of maybe 90 seconds. The police arrived within 12 minutes. Detective Robert Chin took the case immediately. He was thorough and methodical, exactly the kind of investigator you'd want searching for your missing child. He interviewed everyone at the park that day. He checked security cameras from nearby businesses. He coordinated search teams that combed through the neighborhood street by street. They found nothing. No witnesses saw Sarah leave. No cameras captured her walking away. No physical evidence suggested what had happened. She had simply ceased to exist between one moment and the next, as if she'd been erased from reality. What made the case even more peculiar was Sarah herself. She was a cautious child, her mother explained. She wouldn't go anywhere with a stranger. She knew her address and phone number. She understood to yell for help if someone tried to grab her. Jennifer had been careful, maybe even overprotective, teaching Sarah all the rules that were supposed to keep children safe. But those rules didn't matter when a child vanished without a trace. The first 48 hours were chaos. Police set up tip lines. Local news stations broadcast Sarah's photo, a school picture from the previous spring, showing a small girl with dark brown hair, bright green eyes, and a gap-toothed smile. Missing person flyers appeared on every telephone pole, in every shop window, on community boards across the city. The public response was immediate and overwhelming. Everyone wanted to help. Search volunteers combed through Forest Park. Divers checked the Willamette River. Helicopters searched from above. The entire city seemed to mobilize around finding one missing 8-year-old girl. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. The intensive searches slowed. The news coverage faded. The tip line went quiet. Detective Chin kept the case active, kept following every lead, no matter how unlikely. But leads dried up. The trail went cold. By December 1995, Jennifer Mitchell had resigned herself to a truth no parent should ever have to accept. Her daughter was probably gone forever. She moved through the world like a ghost after that. She kept Sarah's room exactly as it had been. She celebrated Sarah's birthday alone every year, buying a cake she would never eat. She carried the same school photo in her wallet, the edges wearing soft from being touched too many times. Every time the phone rang, her heart would jump, thinking maybe, just maybe, this would be the call telling her Sarah was coming home. That call would come, but not for 13 more years. And when it did, everything Jennifer thought she knew about her daughter's disappearance would turn out to be wrong. Picture Day at Riverside Elementary was always a production. 260 students needed to have their individual photos taken, plus class group photos for every grade. The photographer, an older man named Frank Carson, who'd been doing school photos in Portland for 23 years, had his routine down to a science. Third grade was scheduled for 10:30 a.m. Mrs. Patterson's class lined up in the hallway, 21 8- and 9-year-olds fidgeting, whispering, checking their hair in a reflection of a trophy case. Mrs. Patterson counted heads, checked her roster, ushered them into the multipurpose room where Frank had set up his equipment. The children arranged themselves in 3 rows, 7 in back standing on risers, 7 in the middle on chairs, 7 sitting cross-legged on the floor. Mrs. Patterson stood at the end of the back row, her hand resting on the shoulder of Timothy Brooks, the tallest student. Frank Carson looked through his viewfinder, adjusted the lighting, told everyone to smile. Say cheese. Click. The photo was taken at 10:47 a.m. on September 14th, 1995. Nobody would look at it carefully for 13 years. What happened in the weeks following Picture Day seemed completely unrelated to the photograph. Sarah Mitchell was abducted on August 31st, 2 weeks before school pictures were even taken. When the photos were delivered to Riverside Elementary in October, Sarah was already missing. Her individual portrait was given to the office, held in case her mother wanted it. The class photo was framed and hung on the wall outside Mrs. Patterson's classroom. As was tradition, life moved forward. Children graduated from 3rd grade to 4th, 4th to 5th. Mrs. Patterson retired in 2001 after 34 years of teaching. The photograph remained on the wall, slowly fading in the fluorescent light, becoming part of the building's permanent fixtures that nobody really looked at anymore. In 2008, the school district made budget cuts. Riverside Elementary was slated for closure. Parents and former students organized to save it, but the decision stood. The building would be torn down. Students would be redistributed to other schools in the district. This is where Margaret Patterson comes back into the story. Margaret had been sorting through memory boxes in her basement that June, looking for old lesson plans to donate to the Portland Teachers Archive. She found grade books, attendance records, curriculum materials from 3 decades of teaching. And she found something else, her personal copy of the 1995 to 1996 3rd grade class photo. She kept it all these years, along with every other class photo from her career. Looking at it now, 13 years later, her mind started doing what teachers' minds do, putting names to faces, remembering personalities, wondering where all those children had ended up. She counted the faces in the photograph, 22 children. That stopped her. She pulled out her grade book from that year, ran her finger down the roster. 21 students enrolled in her 3rd grade class in the fall of 1995. Margaret counted again, once carefully, then a second time to be sure. 22 faces in the photograph, 21 names on her roster. She tried to reconcile the discrepancy. Maybe a child had transferred in briefly, but no transfer student would have been present for Picture Day in September if they weren't on her enrollment roster. Maybe a child from another class had sneaked into the photo as a joke? Possible, but unlikely. The photographer was strict about checking rosters before taking class pictures. Margaret pulled out a magnifying glass. She studied each face carefully, trying to match them to names she remembered. Most of the children she could identify immediately. Timothy Brooks in the back row, Maria Santos sitting in front, David Wong at the end of the middle row. But there was one girl. 2nd row from the front, 3rd from the left. Dark brown hair, green eyes, slight smile. Margaret couldn't remember her name, couldn't place her face among her memories of that class. She pulled out more records. Old papers, art projects, writing samples she'd saved. She cross-referenced everything against the photograph. Slowly, methodically, she identified 21 of the 22 children. The dark-haired girl with green eyes wasn't in any of her records. This child had somehow been photographed with her class, but had never been her student. Margaret felt something cold settle in her stomach. She walked to her computer and did something she should have done years ago. She searched online for Missing Child Portland 1995. Sarah Mitchell's face appeared on her screen. Same dark hair, same green eyes, same age the child in the photograph would have been. Margaret stared at the missing person poster, then back at the class photograph. Her hand started shaking so badly she had to set the photo down. There was a child in her third-grade class picture who had disappeared 2 weeks before picture day. When Margaret Patterson called the Portland Police Department to report what she'd found, the desk sergeant almost dismissed it as a confused elderly woman misremembering details. School photos from 13 years ago, a missing child who vanished before the picture was taken. It sounded impossible, but Margaret was insistent. She had documentation. She had the photograph. She would bring everything to the station if someone would just listen. Detective Robertson was 61 years old in 2008. He'd never closed the Sarah Mitchell case. Kept a file on his desk, reviewed it annually, followed up on tips even when they led nowhere. When he heard an elderly teacher want to discuss Sarah Mitchell, he agreed to meet with her. Margaret arrived with 3 items. The class photograph, her grade book from 1995 to 1996, and printed copies of her student records from that year. Chun looked at the photograph, looked at the grade book, counted faces, counted names. "This doesn't make sense," he said quietly. "I know." Sarah Mitchell disappeared on August 31st, 1995. School pictures were taken on September 14th. She couldn't have been in this photograph. And yet there she is. Chin studied the image more carefully. The girl who appeared to be Sarah Mitchell was positioned in the second row, third from the left. She was wearing a blue dress with white flowers. Her hair was pulled back with a clip. She was smiling, though the smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Could this be from the previous year? Chin asked. Margaret shook her head. No. Look at the date stamp on the back. She turned over the photograph. September 14th, 1995. And besides, I didn't teach third grade the year before. I was in second grade then. Chin made copies of everything Margaret brought. He thanked her for coming forward. After she left, he sat alone in his office staring at the photograph until the light outside his window turned dark. How does a child appear in a photograph taken 2 weeks after she disappeared? The logical explanations came first. Photo manipulation. Wrong date on the timestamp. Misidentification of the child. Chin investigated each possibility systematically. The photograph had never been digitized. It was an original print from 1995, processed using traditional film photography. Photo manipulation of this sophistication would have been extremely difficult in 1995, and there was no evidence of alteration under forensic examination. The timestamp was verified through school district records. September 14th, 1995, was definitely picture day at Riverside Elementary. Multiple other photographs from that day had the same timestamp. As for misidentification, Chin obtained Sarah Mitchell's dental records and compared them to the child in the photograph. The spacing of the teeth, the slight gap in front. Forensic odontology confirmed a match with high probability. This was Sarah Mitchell in that photograph. Somehow, Chun did what any good detective does when facing an impossible situation. He went back to basics. He contacted Frank Carson, the photographer who'd taken the picture. Frank was 71 now, long retired, but he remembered Riverside Elementary. He remembered that day in September 1995. "I photographed every class that day," Frank explained. "Used the same process I'd used for 23 years. Kids lined up. I checked the teacher's roster, made sure I had the right number of children, took the shot. Do you remember checking the roster for Mrs. Patterson's third grade? I remember checking every roster. That's how I made sure I didn't miss anyone or include kids from other classes. The roster had 21 names. The photograph has 22 children. Frank was quiet for a long moment. That's not possible. But it happened. Then someone brought an extra child in after I checked the roster. This was the first crack in the case. If Sarah Mitchell appeared in a photograph taken after she'd been abducted, someone had deliberately placed her there. Someone had walked her into Riverside Elementary on September 14th, positioned her with Mrs. Patterson's third grade class, and then removed her before anyone noticed. Chin started pulling security footage from 1995, or what little existed. Riverside Elementary didn't have comprehensive security cameras back then, but nearby businesses might have. He found one, a convenience store 3 blocks from the school that had kept the security tapes from September 1995 in storage as part of an unrelated investigation. The quality was poor, grainy black and white, but it showed the street outside the store, including people walking toward Riverside Elementary on the morning of September 14th. Chun watched hours of footage, parents dropping off kids, teachers arriving, the morning routine of an elementary school. And then, at 10:23 a.m., just before third grade pictures were scheduled, he saw something that made his blood run cold. A woman walking hand in hand with a small girl. The woman wore sunglasses and a baseball cap. The girl had dark brown hair and was wearing what looked like a blue dress with white flowers. They walked toward the school. 17 minutes later, they walked back in the opposite direction. The girl's head was down. The woman was walking quickly. Chun froze the frame, enhanced the image as much as 1995 technology allowed. The woman's face was mostly obscured, but the girl could be Sarah Mitchell, could be someone else. The image quality was too poor to say definitively, but the timing was exact. The clothing matched, and most importantly, someone had walked a child into that school, gotten her into a class photograph she had no reason to be in, and removed her before anyone noticed. I need you to pause right here and help us understand something. Drop a comment with your location. Where in the world are you watching this from? We're putting together something special based on where our community is watching from, and your comment could be part of it. Plus, it helps us know we're not just talking to ourselves here. Take 2 seconds. Drop your city or state below. Detective Chun brought Jennifer Mitchell into the station in July 2008, 13 years after her daughter vanished. She walked into his office, carrying the same hope she carried every other time the police had asked her to come in. "We found something," Chin said, "but I need you to prepare yourself. This is going to be difficult." He showed her the class photograph. Jennifer stared at it for a long time. Her eyes found Sarah immediately. Second row, third from the left, blue dress with white flowers. "That's her," Jennifer whispered. "That's my daughter." "But how?" This photograph was taken on September 14th, 1995, 2 weeks after Sarah was taken. Jennifer's face went pale. "I don't understand." "Neither do I. But someone brought Sarah to this school on picture day. Someone got her into this photograph, and then they took her away again. Why would someone do that?" It was the right question. And Chun had been asking himself the same thing since Margaret Patterson had walked into his office. Why would an abductor risk bringing a missing child back to a location where she might be recognized? What possible purpose could it serve to have Sarah appear in a class photograph? Unless... Chun looked at Jennifer. "Tell me about Sarah's father." Jennifer's expression hardened. "David left when Sarah was 2. No contact since. No child support, no visits, nothing. Did he have any connection to Riverside Elementary?" "No." "Why?" "I need you to think carefully. Did David or anyone from his family ever express interest in custody? Ever make threats?" "David's mother called me once, maybe 6 months before Sarah disappeared. Said David wanted to see his daughter. I said no. He'd given up that right when he walked away." She made a note. "Do you remember his mother's name?" "Eleanor. Eleanor Mitchell." That night, Chin ran a background check on Eleanor Mitchell. She lived in Beaverton, Oregon, 15 minutes from Riverside Elementary. She'd worked as a substitute teacher in the Portland School District from 1992 to 1997. A substitute teacher who would know school routines, who would have access to buildings, who could walk into an elementary school without raising suspicion. Chen's next discovery made his stomach turn. Eleanor Mitchell had worked at Riverside Elementary on September 14, 1995. She'd covered for a teacher who called in sick. She'd been in the building the exact day the class photograph was taken. The pieces started fitting together. Eleanor Mitchell takes Sarah from playground, keeps her hidden for 2 weeks, then brings her to Riverside Elementary on picture day, possibly hoping to somehow enroll her under a different name, or simply wanting photographic proof that Sarah was safe and cared for. But it still didn't fully make sense. Why risk bringing her back? Why put her in a photograph where she could potentially be identified? Chen dug deeper into Eleanor Mitchell's background, and he found something that recontextualized everything. Eleanor Mitchell had lost a daughter, David's younger sister, in 1987. The girl had died in a car accident at age 8. Sarah Mitchell was 8 years old when she disappeared, the same age as Eleanor's deceased daughter. This wasn't a simple custody dispute. This was a woman replacing the child she'd lost. Chen obtained a warrant to search Eleanor Mitchell's property in Beaverton. What they found there answered some questions and raised a dozen more. In a bedroom at the back of the house, investigators discovered clothing in a child's size, toys, books, and photographs. Dozens of photographs of a dark-haired girl at different ages. Some looked like Sarah Mitchell. Others were definitely Eleanor's deceased daughter from the 1980s. But Sarah herself wasn't there. Eleanor Mitchell was at home when police arrived, cooperative but confused. She was 73 years old, showing early signs of dementia. Where's Sarah? Chen asked her. Eleanor looked at him blankly. Sarah who? Sarah Mitchell, your granddaughter. The child you took from the playground in August 1995. I don't know what you're talking about. They questioned her for hours. Sometimes she seemed lucid, denying everything. Other times she seemed lost, talking about her deceased daughter, as if she were still alive. At one point, she mentioned a little girl who visits sometimes, but couldn't or wouldn't say more. Eleanor Mitchell was charged with kidnapping, but the case fell apart almost immediately. Her dementia had progressed significantly since 1995. She couldn't stand trial. She couldn't provide coherent answers about what had happened to Sarah. And she couldn't tell them where Sarah was now. The photograph had led them to the abductor, but the abductor couldn't lead them to the child. Chen had one remaining lead, the woman in the security footage from September 14, 1995. The woman who'd walked Sarah into Riverside Elementary and walked her back out. Eleanor Mitchell, at 73 years old, didn't match the build or height of the woman in the footage. She'd had an accomplice, someone who'd help her keep Sarah hidden, someone who might still know where Sarah was. Chen went back through Eleanor's phone records from 1995. One number appeared repeatedly in the months surrounding Sarah's disappearance, a landline registered to Margaret Coleman, Eleanor's younger sister. Margaret Coleman lived in Eugene, Oregon, 2 hours south of Portland. She was 69 years old, widowed, living alone in a small house near the university. Chen drove down to interview her in August 2008. The woman who answered the door looked exhausted, like she'd been waiting 13 years for this conversation. You know why I'm here, Chen said. Margaret Coleman nodded. I knew someone would come eventually. I hoped Eleanor would tell you herself before she got too sick to remember. Tell me what happened. Margaret invited him inside. They sat in a living room filled with photographs, none of which showed any children. Eleanor called me in August 1995, Margaret began. Said she'd found a little girl alone at a playground. Said the child was being neglected. She wanted to take care of her for a while, just until she could find the child's real family. You believed her? Eleanor had been unstable since my niece died, but I never thought she'd actually kidnapped someone. When I realized what she'd really done, I didn't know what to do. If I went to police, Eleanor would go to prison. The child seemed fine when I saw her, scared but physically fine. You saw Sarah? A few times. Eleanor brought her to my house maybe 4 times over that first year. She called the girl Emily, dressed her up, treated her like a replacement for the daughter she'd lost. The photograph from September 14th. Were you the one who brought Sarah to the school that day? Margaret closed her eyes. Yes, Eleanor insisted. She wanted proof that the girl was being cared for, proof that she was in school, living a normal life. She thought if there was a school photograph, it meant everything was okay. I didn't understand it then. I still don't. Where is Sarah now? This was the question everything had been building toward. 13 years. Thousands of hours of investigation. One grandmother dead in memory, if not in body. One accomplice finally ready to confess. Margaret Coleman looked at Chun with tears streaming down her face. I don't know. The room went silent. What do you mean you don't know? Eleanor kept moving her. Different houses, different caregivers. She was paranoid about being caught. The last time I saw Sarah was in 1997. Eleanor told me she'd found a safe place for her, but wouldn't say where. I begged her to tell me. She refused. Said it was better if nobody knew. Who else was involved? I don't know all the names. Eleanor had. She had friends from some kind of support group for parents who'd lost children. Some of them were willing to help her keep Sarah hidden. It was like a network. Chun felt sick. This wasn't just one grandmother's delusion. It was multiple people, multiple locations, a deliberate effort to keep a child hidden from her mother. Give me names. Any names you remember. Margaret provided 3. Linda Harrison, Patricia Ross, Susan Chun. No relation to detective. All women in their 60s and 70s. All members of a Portland area grief support group for parents who'd lost children. Chun investigated each name. Linda Harrison had died in 2003. Patricia Ross had moved to Arizona in 2001. Susan Chun, the third woman, was still in Portland, living in a retirement community. When Chun interviewed Susan Chun in September 2008, she was 71 years old and suffering from terminal cancer. She had maybe 6 months left to live. She had nothing left to lose by telling the truth. I kept her for 2 years, Susan said. From 1997 to 1999, Eleanor brought her to me, said her granddaughter needed a safe place to stay while family issues got worked out. The girl called herself Emily by then. Seemed to believe that was really her name. Where did she go after you? Eleanor took her back. Said she'd found a permanent placement. That's the last I knew. Did Eleanor tell you where this permanent placement was? No, but she mentioned something about the girl finally getting to go to a real school, about how she'd always wanted her granddaughter to have a proper education. A real school. Chun went back to Eleanor Mitchell's house with a new search warrant. This time he wasn't looking for evidence of Sarah's presence in 1995. He was looking for evidence of where Eleanor might have sent her in 1999. In Eleanor's desk, buried under years of junk mail and old bills, they found it. Enrollment papers for a private boarding school in Northern California. The papers were for a student named Emily Mitchell, enrolled in September 1999. Chin called the school. Yes, they had records of Emily Mitchell. She'd attended from 1999 to 2007. Graduated. They had a forwarding address for transcripts, an apartment in San Francisco. The young woman who answered the door of the San Francisco apartment was 21 years old. She had dark brown hair, green eyes, and a slight gap between her front teeth. Detective Chen showed his badge. Are you Emily Mitchell? Yes. What's this about? I need to ask you some questions about your childhood. May I come in? Emily Mitchell, who had been Sarah Mitchell for the first 8 years of her life, invited him into a small studio apartment filled with textbooks. She was a senior at San Francisco State University, studying psychology. What's your earliest memory? Chen asked. Emily thought about it. I remember living with my grandmother when I was little, playing in her garden. She was very kind to me. Do you remember anything before living with your grandmother? No. Grandmother said I was in an accident when I was young. That's why I don't remember my early childhood. Emily, I need you to listen carefully to what I'm about to tell you. Your real name is Sarah Mitchell. You were taken from a playground in Portland, Oregon in August 1995 when you were 8 years old. The young woman stared at him. That's not possible. Chun laid out the evidence. The class photograph, the security footage, the statements from Margaret Coleman and Susan Chun, the enrollment records that traced a path from Portland to Northern California. Emily's hands were shaking. I don't remember any of that. Your grandmother, Eleanor Mitchell, lost her daughter in 1987. You were the same age as her daughter when she took you. She convinced you that you were her granddaughter, that your name was Emily, that you'd always been with her. I don't believe you. Chin pulled out a photograph. The missing person poster from 1995. Sarah Mitchell, age 8, dark hair, green eyes, gap-toothed smile. Emily looked at the photograph, looked at her reflection in a mirror across the room. Oh my God! Your real mother's name is Jennifer Mitchell. She's been searching for you for 13 years. She never gave up hope. Emily started crying. I don't know if I'm ready for this. I know, but I need to ask. Do you want to see her? The reunion happened in a quiet room at Portland Police Department in October 2008. Jennifer Mitchell waited, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. She'd been told they'd found Sarah, been warned that Sarah didn't remember her, been prepared for the possibility that her daughter might not want to reconnect. The door opened. A young woman walked in. Jennifer would later say she knew immediately the way her daughter moved, the expression in her eyes. 13 years of changes, and she still knew her child. Sarah, the young woman, Emily, nodded slowly. My name is Emily now. I know everything is confusing right now. I need you to know I never stopped looking. Not for one single day. They sat across from each other, not touching, not quite ready for that. Emily spoke first. I don't remember you. I'm sorry. I don't remember my life before Eleanor. That's okay. We'll figure out together. I don't know if I want to be called Sarah. Then we'll call you Emily. Or anything else you want. I just want my daughter back. They talked for 3 hours that first day. Not about the past. That was too overwhelming. About the present. About Emily's life in San Francisco. About Jennifer's life in Portland. About small things that let them start to know each other again. The second meeting happened a week later. The third 2 weeks after that. Slowly, carefully, they built a relationship. Not mother and daughter at first. Two strangers learning to trust each other. Emily eventually moved back to Portland, finished her degree at Portland State. She and Jennifer had dinner together every Sunday. They didn't rush things. Some memories came back. Fragments, flashes, moments that felt familiar. But mostly Emily had to accept that her first 8 years were lost. The case against Eleanor Mitchell never went to trial. Her dementia had progressed too far. She died in a memory care facility in 2010, still talking sometimes about her granddaughter Emily, who was going to visit any day now. Margaret Coleman pled guilty to accessory to kidnapping. She received 3 years probation due to her age and cooperation. She never spoke to Emily directly, but sent a letter apologizing for the role she played. The other members of Eleanor's network were harder to prosecute. Most were elderly, sick, or deceased. The district attorney decided that pursuing them wouldn't serve justice, wouldn't bring back the years Sarah had lost. In 2010, Emily Mitchell gave her first and only interview about her experience. The local news station asked her one question that she'd been thinking about for 2 years. What do you think when you look at that class photograph now? Emily pulled out the copy Detective Chun had given her. 22 faces. 3rd grade. September 14th, 1995. I think about all the people who walked past this photograph for 13 years and never noticed I was there. I think about how sometimes the most obvious clues are the ones people miss because they're looking too hard for complicated answers. Do you blame them? No. I blame the people who put me in that photograph thinking nobody would ever check, thinking they were so clever. But someone did check, and that's what brought me home. The class photograph hangs in Emily's apartment now, next to a photo of her and Jennifer from 2009, 2 images separated by 14 years. One showing a child who didn't belong. One showing a mother and daughter finding their way back to each other. What Margaret Patterson discovered that day in 2008. The impossibility of a child appearing in a photograph taken after she'd vanished broke the case wide open. But it also revealed something deeper about how abduction works. How children can be hidden in plain sight, and how sometimes finding the truth requires looking at what's been there all along. Sarah Mitchell was missing for 13 years. But in a way, she was never really lost. She was right there in that photograph, waiting for someone to count carefully enough to notice a child who shouldn't have been there. Emily Mitchell still goes by that name. She's a therapist now, working with children who've experienced trauma. She and Jennifer have a good relationship. Not the one they would have had if those 13 years hadn't been stolen, but a real relationship built on honesty about what happened and patience with what was lost. Every September 14th, Emily looks at that class photograph. She studies the face of the 8-year-old girl who didn't know she'd been kidnapped, who thought her name was Emily, who smiled for the camera because that's what children do on picture day. And she thinks about all the other children who might be in photographs somewhere hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone to count the faces carefully enough to notice the one who doesn't belong. The class photo from Riverside Elementary taught us something important. Evidence doesn't always hide. Sometimes it sits in plain view for 13 years, framed on a wall, waiting for someone to finally see what's been there all along. If this story affected you, think about the missing children in your own community. Look at the faces. Count carefully. Because sometimes the person who brings them home is just someone who finally noticed what everyone else walked past. This case changed how missing children investigations handle school photographs and records. If you want to help, share this video. The more people who understand how abductors hide children in plain sight, the more likely we are to find the one still missing. What's your take on this? How did Eleanor Mitchell manage to hide Sarah for 13 years? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We read every single one. If this story hit home, check out our video on the cold case that was solved by a grocery store receipt. Link